Welcome to Talking New York Real Estate with Vince Rocco. Our show is all about the exciting world of real estate and in particular, how it relates to the luxury New York marketplace. But if you are not planning a real estate transaction in New York, we still have plenty of information you can use no matter where you are. Now, here's our show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Vince Rocco in New York, where the state of our industry can be expensive. So let's get right to what everyone is talking about. In New York City real estate, we've always obsessed over one number, price per square foot. It's the benchmark, the shorthand, the metric brokers, buyers, and appraisers lean on to deliver value. But in today's market, that number alone is incomplete because buyers aren't just purchasing space, they're underwriting lifestyle, liquidity, and long-term exposure. Monthly maintenance, common charges, real estate taxes, insurance, assessments, energy cost. Everything. These recurring obligations are no longer secondary considerations. They are central to the investment decision. In many cases, carrying costs are now the new price per square foot. In co-ops and condos across Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens, buyers are recalibrating what value actually means. So today, we're unpacking how buyers should evaluate carrying cost relative to the purchase price. How should sellers position properties with high monthlies? And how does this redefine value in a market that is more payment sensitive than it was just a few years ago? Because in this cycle, affordability isn't just about what you pay to get in, it's about what it costs to stay in. And on set with me today are Ben Willig from Brown Harris Stevens, Anna Kahn also from Brown Harris Stevens, and Jill Preschel from Serhant. And they join me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and my viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. This is Talking New York Real Estate, so let's go behind the headlines and inside the state of our industry.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So, carrying costs are the new price per square foot. And anybody who knows me, especially, my students when I'm teaching, I carry on about price per square foot. I've said for years and years and years, whoever created that term, price per square foot, needs to be shot because the whole industry has been based on that forever. If someone thinks that the price per square foot is too high, it doesn't work for them, regardless of what the apartment looks like. And I always say when people come in, it's a visual thing. Forget about the numbers, but here they are on the phone. What do you mean $1,700 a square foot? That's insane. Okay, it's in your price point, right? So we've kind of changed. And it's not necessarily only about price per square foot today. And we're going to talk to the experts here today as they explain to us what else is now in the way of value. So Ben, let me start with you. Are carrying costs now a primary decision driver for buyers, even ahead of, the purchase price, which used to be everything? How much can I get off on the purchase price? What kind of discount can I get? That's all we heard for years and years and years. I don't hear that too much anymore. Your opinion on that?
Well, so I think there's a couple of things that people need to base, right, for the purpose of this talk, right? Manhattan real estate the last 10 years, price-wise, absolute price-wise, has remained pretty constant, limited, appreciation compared to other markets. And I love what you said. I think you can look no further on a price per square foot basis than in residential. People buy with emotion and justify with logic is always one of my favorite things. It's
well
right
said.
when that moment when
well
you walk
said.
in. So commercial is price per square foot matters because it's all logic.
Yep.
But residential is different. So let's throw that out the window for a second. So we've had limited, sort of that, price appreciation. And, people are going to have that emotion when they come in. And then the logic, sensations are going to, come in and happen after that. So if you're a broker, what you want to do is you want to get ahead of those things. You want to be a trusted advisor. And you want to know and understand what that story is. So I think being able to peel back the layers of, what's going on behind the maintenance cost and all those types of things, like what's actually driving those? Because if we just look at the absolute number, it's like looking at the symptoms of a disease, not actually what's going on underneath the surface. And I think that's what we're going to get a little bit more into. So
we are. And, when I said before, everybody used to be so focused on price per square foot, it was almost like, they would come into an open house or come into a private showing And they would stand there and actually just calculate this, and it would kind of delude everything else about that apartment, about, the flow, et cetera, et cetera. Jill, in your opinion, how has that changed? Now, I know purchase price is still, important. And if things are overpriced, we're going to, need to lower the price a little bit eventually. But there are things, though, these days, especially in this market, that are priced right. And I don't really hear too much about people, complaining about the purchase price, but I am hearing more and more about the overall, and they're using the term carrying costs. What are you seeing in your world?
I'm seeing exactly that. And what's really interesting is there used to be almost, that a certain buyer of a certain net worth was focused on this number. But I have buyers with net worths of 30 to 50 million that are focused on the monthly because it's all about liquidity.
Yeah.
So the purchase price is an important factor. But when you think about their liquidity, because many of them in their positions don't have necessarily regular liquidity that they're afforded through whatever businesses they're in, the monthly is actually critical. So this is something I'm working on with a few of my buyers right now. And then to switch gears in new construction, when we're in pre-development and we're planning, that's something we're critically aware of. And how can we work through the Schedule B to make those services realistic and those total monthlies make sense? It used to be $2 a square foot. I mean, I'm aging myself, but now
I remember I remember $1.50 a square foot. Okay, so I can go back to that. Mm-hmm.
But now, if we're $3.50 or $3, that's a win. We take that and we run with that. I miss those days.
Don't we all? Anna Kahn, my friend Anna Kahn from Diva Lane.
So great to see you, Vince.
Oh, my God. I love having you here. In today's rate environment, though, where we're so focused on interest rates and all of that stuff, how has payment sensitivity reshaped buyers' behavior? Are they still focused on rates? Are they looking at the overall carrying cost? Because, look, I've said many times on this show in the past several weeks, I'm seeing double-digit maintenance increases, common charge increase, double digits. We used to carry on when increases were 3%, 4%, and maybe 5%. You'd say, oh, wow, 5%, that's crazy. We're seeing double digits. So that adds to the drama, right, of carrying cost overall. But what about rate sensitivity? Is that still playing a role in the overall carrying cost conversation?
It is, absolutely. Right now we have a short memory where we're remembering 3% interest rates. Let's not forget that 7% is the 50-year average, and we're a point below that right now. So, of course, everybody is calculating their monthly cost. And I believe that the reason that this is a topic au courant is that the interest rate and also the affordability crisis in general in New York City. When a half a gallon of milk is $13, everybody's going to look very carefully and more so than ever at their monthly carrying costs. And one other thing I just want to add is also the dreaded question for co-ops. What is the square footage? We're not even supposed to quote square footage on co-ops. So that's a whole other.
Well, that's why I always found it amusing when the first question people would ask me is, so what's the price per square foot in a co-op? And I'd say, well, I don't really know because we haven't really measured, because we can't measure, whatever. And they wouldn't buy it. So, you had to kind of dance around that. Well, I think the apartment is about 1,100 feet. Don't quote me, but, whatever. Ben, and you're talking to agents throughout the day, the week, the whatever. Are you seeing deals fall apart more often over the monthlies versus, a negotiated price? Or is it something, again, that we're just exaggerating because everybody is saying or focusing on carrying costs are high, but a deal's actually falling apart because of that?
So I think you have multiple points of failure across, a deal. And let's talk about, what weight is placed on each point of failure. I think negotiations still carry, the better agents who do their homework and they get ahead of all those things and are better at negotiations are going to have fewer deals fall apart at, the negotiation table than less experienced agents I see might have a much lower ratio of those deals that go through during the negotiations. And so now I think one of the really important things to do beforehand, right, with all those costs. And you mentioned, hey, these double-digit increases. And I've been on my condo board, I've been on my co-op board, so I've been in these conversations where you're having to decide what the increases are going to be. And again, I go back to if you're an agent, if you're a consumer, just like we should throw the square footage out, let's throw the headline number of what the carrying cost is out the window. Because to me, that means nothing without knowing what's going on underneath the surface. So I want to know, what's the underlying mortgage? Is a union contract up for review? Is there a big major capital improvement work coming on? And oh, by the way, there's a huge difference between a heating and cooling capital improvement that's $2 million and a lobby and hallway renovation that's $2 million. One of them is going to add equity to your unit. One of them is just going to be a sunk cost. So, once you get below that surface, some of those buildings that have been artificially held low, and you start looking, you're like, of course they had to have those big increases. So there's a lot of nuance there, I think, to the whole picture. So.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. But when we're talking to buyers, okay, and we're trying to advise them properly over, a 5 or 10 year value proposition kind of thing that we used to look, anytime I would sell an apartment, I'd say to a buyer, when we're out there looking, don't only focus on negotiating a purchase price, okay? If you're getting a good price, you may not like the price, but if it's a good price, the value is there today. But more importantly, that value is going to be there 5 years, 6 years, 7 years out when you might turn around and need to sell that. So it's about the value going in and the value when you need to leave. Today I'm hearing things like, well, if things are so expensive now, Vince, we all know that those carrying costs are going to continue to go up. How much value is going to be there in 5 years? So how do we coach our buyers with that?
You have to be buying for the right reasons, first of all.
Yeah.
Right. And so if, when people come to me and they ask, well, what are the hottest neighborhoods right now?
Yeah.
Right. That to me is the wrong question to be asking. Right. That basically is, how can I make a quick buck? And if you're coming to me in New York City saying, how can we make a quick buck?
No.
That's not the right question. The right questions to ask are, how am I going to mitigate my losses? Right. And when you look at that, and New York City real estate, and you're buying for the right reasons, it's going to be different for every situation. So if that $30 to $50 million client will be paying an exorbitant amount of rent and they plan on being here for the long term, that's a lot of potential, sunk costs. But some of them on the luxury rentals in the high-end luxury market are much lower than what it costs them to carry some of these apartments. So then that equation flips. Right. So every situation is a little bit different in every price range right now. And I think that education of what are the right reasons, what does it look like for your financial situation? Because if you have time on your side, you're always going to win on real estate and in New York real estate when you look at a lot of those mitigating factors.
And when we talk about the high end, and everybody's got a different number for high end, okay? I kind of like to say it's 5, 6, 7 and above, but, most of our industry wants to, bottom it out at, say, 4 million. Are people who are buying at that price point, 4 million, say, and up, right? 10 million, 15 million, whatever it may be. Are they as price sensitive to carrying costs per month? Or is it like, it's a cash deal, I can afford whatever the monthlies are because I'm paying for the apartment or the townhouse, whatever, right up front, and it doesn't really matter what my carrying costs are going to be? Are they especially more sensitive or not at all?
So I always say that the people who have a lot of money have it because they have saved and they're very careful about what they're spending. So you can't pull the wool over their eyes to not explain what the costs are. And they want a building that's solid. And also, it's very important to not forget that what carrying cost is shown when we show an apartment is actually there could be an assessment around the corner. So those people are going to be as careful, I believe, as the lower end of the market in assessing monthly costs.
You bring up my next question, and it's about assessments. Again, I'm in this business for 24 years, and I have never, I don't remember seeing as many buildings today or then having as many assessments as today. It's almost like every building you go into. And a problem, that I'm encountering in a lot of buildings is they're kind of indefinite assessments, time frame. Yeah. There's no end date. Yes. Or when there is an end date, it gets
not an assessment,
pushed.
That's an increase to your maintenance.
Thank you. But in addition to that, there is an increase in maintenance. So, Jill, when your buyers are out there and they look at these assessments, I mean, are they getting scared off at $500, $600, whatever the $100 in addition is, or are they just saying, well, it's going to go away eventually? I mean, I just lost a deal last fall, because the building couldn't give us an end date. And my buyer is kind of like just stretching and saying, okay, I could afford that extra $500 for a few months, but I can't do that indefinitely.
You know what's really interesting? So with this particular buyer that I'm working with that has the net worth in that range, the homes that we're looking at are around $5 million. Won't look at anything with an assessment. Just won't look at anything with an assessment. When I had someone that was purchasing for their daughter that was in grad school, we found the building that we all loved, that made sense in that building, a never-ending assessment. We went in eyes wide open. We negotiated a credit. We explained sort of what that was going to look like. And they were okay with it. They were comfortable with it. But to your point, most people are not. A never-ending assessment is really a wild feature of a building. They weren't able to explain what it was going towards and why. So it is essentially an increase. And then what I think is interesting is most of my folks that are the $5 million and above are not all cash these days. Most of them are leveraging some sort of other vehicle or utility to purchase. So that monthly does come under scrutiny.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about, the threshold that buyers have in their mind, how much they're willing to deal with, how much they're willing to spend, and on and on and on. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. We are coming back after these messages. Don't go away.
The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay, we are back. So, Ben, at what threshold do monthlies really begin to materially shrink the buyer pool? As I indicated before, we've had a buyer slowdown, for a couple of years. First, it's interest rates, and there's not a lot of inventory. There's a whole bunch of reasons and things that are going on. But do you think that all of this carrying cost stuff, or the high cost of carry, is shrinking the buyer pool? And are they sitting back saying, well, eventually things are going to change, or eventually things are going to get better? We all know that that's not going to happen. What's your opinion on that?
So I'm a big data nerd, and I love looking at more and more, data. And I wish I had all the studies for this type of thing, but I'll give a mixture of data with, I think, some anecdotal, type of stuff. So based on, approximately today's rates, every $550 or so increase in your maintenance or carry cost, equates to about $100,000 of a mortgage, right? So typically what we see in a lot of the lower, and let's call it entry level pricing, is if the seller has priced that in, right, and you're only a little bit off of, so let's say the norm is $1,500 for your maintenance, but your unit is maybe $1,750 to $2,000, and you've priced for the exact same unit that just sold with lower maintenance, maybe a little bit, $50,000, $100,000 lower, you're probably still going to see pretty reasonable traction, and most consumers will, be okay with it. It's once you get, start getting further, let's call it larger standard deviations, or just much bigger percentages off of the mean and the median, where then consumers are going to say, okay, what else, right? So if you start to see those really large differentials from sort of those average prices, it's a losing game continuing to try and play that offset with yourself. And the best example I think we have of that is land lease buildings in New York. So that math that I just gave is not a perfect equation for those, because you have that other factor that creates some of that unknown and some additional price drop. And those are on those extreme examples. And whenever you get so far in the extreme, that's really when you're going to have those major differences with consumers either being gun shy or not wanting to look at them at all or whatever the case might be.
Hey, just for our listeners and viewers out there outside of New York, just explain quickly land lease, because you're right, that can be a problem. Additional cost, whatever. Just explain to them what you mean by a land lease.
Yeah, and
nothing
is black or white as a problem. I always say the answer that answers everything in real estate is it depends.
In life, it depends.
Yeah. So a land lease for some people can be a great thing, and so you might be able to get a much lower price, and it's a well-structured land lease. So this is by no means a knock on land lease buildings by any means. So
no, not at all.
Yeah, it's where in very basic terms, a traditional building, you own the land and you build on the land, so you kind of own everything there. If I went and bought a plot of land and then you, Vince, came and said, hey, I want to build this building on top of it, I lease that to you for $1 million a year. And now all the people who own in this building, in addition to their regular operating costs, have also this lease they have to pay. There are, it's probably another podcast in terms of the technicalities on that and what to look for, but at a very basic level, that's what we're looking at.
I was going to say that's all of Battery Park City.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
It's not uncommon for the most part. Yeah.
And what you find down there in Battery Park City are lovely homes, beautiful views, lower priced, because taking into consideration, the extra cost of the land lease, elevating your maintenance. But let me ask you, so when you're listing a property with elevated, monthlies, higher than normal, for example, how do you control that narrative? I mean, Ben touched on it a bit. You all touched on it. But really, when you're going to market with something that has a little higher monthly or carrying cost than the next, how are you controlling that narrative? Because people are going to ask you, and we have to be prepared, right?
Absolutely. In new development, very often the conversation is with the developers, and very often we see developers buying down the monthlies or subsidizing it. And then there's a secondary conversation with brokers and buyers regarding what that looks like for you in the future. How long is this buy down? What happens to your monthlies thereafter? On the resale side, it can be tricky. So, talking to a developer is a different conversation than talking to someone who...
Indeed it is. Indeed it is.
So being able to have two separate conversations, typically it's understanding that whole monthly nut as it relates to, what would someone be paying if they're renting in this market? And now how do we do that math so the price is desirable enough to offset all of that math? How can we make ourselves really appealing?
Yeah, and that's paramount, in my opinion. But Anna, can aggressive pricing, again, going to market with a listing, we decide, okay, so the carrying cost may be a little high, so we're going to price this aggressively or lower than, I hate to even say the term lower than market, okay, because a lot of sellers don't want to deal with that. Does that help at all when you're aggressively pricing because of higher carrying cost, or does that stigma linger regardless?
You have to be very careful about pricing too low because it won't come up in the search. So you can't have a $500,000 two-bedroom and nobody will see it. So sometimes what we do is we'll give a 6-month credit at closing, a maintenance credit, a 1-year credit. Pricing too far off the market, you have to be very careful. And like Ben said, it's important to explain the monthly costs. So to explain, here we are with the price, here we are with the land lease. How long is the land lease? Some land leases, you have 100 years to go. You don't have to worry about it resetting. Other land leases are coming due next month. So it really is a matter of the due diligence and having an excellent attorney, an excellent broker to advise you so you know exactly what you're getting into.
Ben, Anna brings up a good point here, and we see a lot of it sometimes in new development, and we certainly have seen it now in on the resale side, these credits, okay? Maintenance is high. Carrying costs in general are high. So sellers are willing to give a credit of whether it's 6 months, a year on something. Are we seeing a lot more of that than ever before, or is it just something that, is happening?
I think it's always just it always has happened in sort of one-off cases. I don't have any data on how much more, it's potentially happening. You've seen more of it at different points. I don't think there's a, huge amount now. And there's more psychology, I think, involved with that. I think most consumers that I have seen are like, yeah, I got a credit. I'm just going to take that and that's what I'm going to use for my furniture. Or, they're not actually allocating it to the maintenance costs and things like that. So it's that
I'll buy a car.
Emotional feel towards the apartment. I'm feeling frustrated about this thing, but now I feel like I've kind of won, and I'm going to use it for this other thing. And you know what? I can justify whatever this maintenance thing is going to be. And again, it's all within reason, and I think each consumer's risk and reward profile. And Jill touched on this a little bit before. How much do you love the apartment? How big is the risk of some of these things? Because there's sometimes no amount of credits that are going to overcome if someone's very, very sensitive to those types of things. So, those are used, I'd say, just to like let the air out of the balloon at the end. They shouldn't be used as like a hammer and just trying to go around and hammer everything that's in your site.
Yeah, and as I talked about before, value when you're buying an apartment should be there when you're buying it in the beginning. And I talked about it in the intro, and then also when you sell it at some point. But my question really is, are sellers actually being forced to reconcile, pricing expectations, keeping all of this in mind? Value, faster sell, easier sell. Yeah, the monthlies are a little higher, but I have to be concerned about a buyer coming in and their affordability on a monthly basis. Can they afford to do this? Because, by the way, I'm going to be sitting with my apartment. I'm talking to a seller. We've been back and forth now for, what is this month? March, from December. And we haven't listed yet. It's a 2-bed, probably going to be in the 1.4, 1.5 range, but in a building I sell all the time, and I sold them the apartment. But they're not being sensitive to the overall carrying cost or the monthlies. They want their number. And that's what they need, or that's what they say they need, or that's what they want. And as a result, how many months have gone by? 4 months, almost 5 months, and we're not listed. And when we do list, who knows how long it's going to take to sell. So I try to, and maybe, I need to figure out my negotiation strategy a little better, but I'm trying to figure out ways to convince these people. And it's not just them. It's a whole bunch of people, from what I'm hearing, that market shifts, market changes, monthlies are higher. I understand you want X amount of dollars for your apartment. You ain't going to get it.
I had this conversation recently with a seller.
Well, you all have.
Yeah.
We all have.
We tested the market at his number for a month and a half.
Yeah.
And I was reporting to him regularly, no bites, inquiries, responses.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to see the apartment because once we talk through the details, there's no interest. So we were able to get through that, but it's so tricky, and the seller has to be really motivated to sell and not be so married to the numbers.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They've got to be motivated to sell. There's got to be that compelling reason why you need to sell, have to sell, job transfer, whatever. Something.
Well, and I think with that is, understanding what the motivation is, but then getting people off of the absolute number and to what they actually would net in their pocket versus what they went into that and what the opportunity cost was or what the opportunity cost will be. Right. And so now you're actually helping them look at a more holistic view and plan, which I see a lot of agents miss on because we all get so fixated on the actual price. Right. So if I sell for $100,000 less, but based on when I bought, I put in $200,000 and now I'm going to see $400,000 out. Well, you have $400,000 of equity that you want to unlock. Is that enough for you to do that thing that you want to do? And, oh, by the way, if this continues to deteriorate, what else could you be doing with that $400,000 that might be a better, use? So you have to forget the past and where are we today and what's the opportunity cost there?
There's the operative word or phrase. We have to forget the past. You are so correct. I mean, you couldn't have coined it any better. I mean, I walk around real estate life every week saying, forget the past.
There we go.
But we all know people overpaid. We all know that people bought in cycles where the market was higher. And so when they sell or need to sell now when the cycle is lower, I need to get my money back. Well, you're still going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you're not going to get what you want. But, it's like, and I think I'm a good talker. I think I'm a good negotiator.
You are.
And when
one of the best.
And when I can't get sellers to understand that it's just not going to happen.
And I think what we're all saying is that because of affordability, because of monthlies, maybe there has been a softening of pricing. And, maybe our sellers are not yet as aware of what we're seeing.
Right.
And
is it they're not aware, or they don't want to be aware, or they kind of do this, yeah, I hear what he's saying or she's saying, but you know what, really?
Well, there's a lot of I'll come out and ask sellers point blank sometimes, if you're fixated on this absolute number, is that because you want to feel good when you're talking to your friends about what you sold it for? Or do you care about, what's actually in your pocket? And some people will say yeah, no, that matters to me. Which is interesting.
It is very interesting, but I've heard the same.
Yeah. My a quick fun one. My Jewish mother would always say, expecting someone else to change is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die.
So there you go.
I was going to say, is that
and there's that.
Yeah. No matter how good you are.
No matter how good you are, there's that. Exactly. Anna, how much are buyers really scrutinizing, building financials, reserve funds, pending assessments? We know that the attorneys go through all that. But when the attorney reviews that process, that due diligence process with the buyers, how close are they really paying attention to the building financials or the reserve funds or, what's pending in assessment? For example, if the reserve funds are low and local law 11 has to happen, which is pointing of the bricks on the building, which every 7 years I think it is, or lobby has to be, fixed or whatever. Do they take that into consideration when they're buying, or are they just so enamored with buying in the New York real estate market and I'm getting a good price and, well, what may happen happens?
That's why they look to us. I won't take a buyer to a building that has poor financials. We know which buildings are solid and which are not. And of course, they're going to, maybe at first they have that emotional reaction, but once they get to the due diligence and their issues, they're not going to put their money in a place that is not a safe investment. Right. And we don't want them to. I'll discourage, I talk people out of selling and buying every single day. Capital gains. You have to look at the full picture. It's not the first apartment. It has to be the right decision, and it has to be a solid investment.
I agree. But reserve funds, most building co-ops, right? We're always looking to, and by the way, co-ops today, when they need to go out there and get more money or refinance, they're facing the same interest rate issue that buyers are. So it's not so easy these days, my opinion, for a co-op to say, hey, I need $500,000 because we need to fix the roof, and then we'll do a special assessment or increase maintenance. But those increases are going to be higher because the interest rate on that new loan is going to be higher. And there was a point in time where it was a lot lower, or we could negotiate what that rate was. Not the same anymore. You're an investor.
I want to play devil's advocate for a second there on that, just not to be, counterculture here on this. But while that is right in a lot of instances, you also need to look at, and this is where the devil's in the details to what everybody's saying here, right? If your mortgage cost, so there's a couple different ways the co-op can finance that. If they're paying interest only, they're not paying anything towards principal, right. They were at a crazy low rate, and that mortgage cost makes up a large percentage of their mortgage because they have, not a lot of staff and things like that. Of their maintenance costs, then yeah, that's going to be a big deal. But if you're in a building with a huge amount of staff, let's say they've been paying down that loan over time on the principal basis, and that loan only makes up 10%, let's just say, of the maintenance costs. Well, even, some consumers during due diligence, they might see a 25% increase when they go to refinance the loan. But what is that in terms of the actual cost of the maintenance? Well, that's 2.5%. And if you were running at a 1% operating revenue, well, now it's even less of an impact. And if, let's just say, that refinance goes to all these great things and it flushes the building with cash, that's a completely different picture. So, it could go either way, and the devil is really in the details on that. That's just one example of how you could be majoring in the minors when you're in due diligence, depending on what you're looking at. If you're looking at that and you're not looking at how much staff and what the union contracts are going to be, then you're totally missing something.
So based on what you just said, though, Ben, again, as an owner, as an investor, whatever, do you feel that co-ops are, with any underlying mortgage still in existence, at a structural disadvantage right now? Or are they just kind of purring along and doing what they got to do?
I mean, I would.
I mean, listen
pose
to
it
what
to
you just said.
I would pose it to
Way,
Jill,
right?
you know, and Anna as well. I mean, I think, and Jill sees it probably more, you know, in the new construction. I think it's probably less of, you know, that versus, hey, we have all these different constraints we're trying to manage, and the product is just not as quality, you know, as some of these new constructions. And the bigger difference we see is consumers really wanting something that's nice and finished and, you know, high end, that sort of A-level, you know, product. So is it the finances or is it that? I don't know. I would be curious your take on it.
Hold on one second. I want to ask Anna, though, about the co-op. No. Good point. And I want to get to the new development. That's actually next. But from a co-op perspective, all I'm reading lately is how hot they are again, how they're coming back again, and how people are really interested in all of that. What are you seeing out there for, you know, the co-op buyer? Because for a while, you know, in my book of business, it was like, if I don't have to buy a co-op, I don't really want to because of all the whatevers. Now, it seems like because the prices are lower, maybe they're jumping in again. I don't know. But then you take all this other stuff into consideration.
The value is in the co-ops. That's where I tell people to look. It may be a more difficult type of ownership.
Tell me why the value is in the co-op. I think I agree with you.
Because the prices are lower, and partially because of what you said, that people have been looking to condos for so long. The co-ops are trading at a lower number. And if you can qualify if this is a primary residence, if it's not a pied-à-terre, every co-op is different. And that's why you have to look to your broker to explain it to you. Yep. Also, the way every co-op and condo operates in terms of, are they going to assess? Are they going to have a higher maintenance? And then not assess and keep their money in reserves? I'd rather keep my money in my bank account and not have my co-op or condo control that money. Assessments are a way to counteract that.
Jill, so from a new development perspective, based on what Ben was saying before, but also are developers misjudging long-term impacts of higher common charges? Are they thinking about the future of their potential buyers or purchasers going forward?
Absolutely. That's always been a part of the conversation. And as you're starting to develop the Schedule B, understanding what are the services you need, what that costs, what does that do to the monthlies? And then I would also say that within my buyers, we've had renewed interest in co-ops that have been renovated in the past 5 or 7 years. And because these co-ops offer this charm that people are looking for in condos and new construction. And now on new development, we're starting to see developers design with that in mind. There's something very cool that's being developed in Brooklyn Heights. They're using Vicky Charles as the design firm, and they're really taking sort of this old world charm and reimagining it. So I think it's all interconnected. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent almost 19 years in new development sales, and quite frankly, it's my happy place. I love selling new development on site or going back on whatever it is. I've sold from floor plans when it was, first, new in New York City. And people would come into my office and sit around, and I'd show them a floor plan. And then I'd take them out into the common area, where we had, mock-up kitchens and bathrooms, whatever. And I'd show them this building model. And I'd say, well, here's where your apartment we're talking about going to be, right over here. And here's your view and whatever. And people would sign on the bottom line. And I'd walk away at night saying, okay, how does anybody buy off a floor plan, right? Of course, over the years that's changed, and people need to see and touch and feel and whatever and walk into a beautiful home. But new development is a phenomenon, okay, and has been. It's slowed down a lot like everything else has. But when you compare it to resale, whether it's co-op, whether it's condo, people still, I believe, want to purchase in a new development, but the pricing is high. Now, you don't have assessments necessarily, right, and you don't have flip tax, right away. But as a brand new purchase, people are more incented, I think, but the prices are high.
The prices are going to get higher, too, because of tariffs and the cost of the materials.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're in pre-development on a few buildings where we've had to reimagine facades, reimagine just design features, because we can no longer get that material, or we can no longer get that material for that price. So it's going to be interesting, and I do think that the average price point of new development, we will see that going up in the next 2 to 3 years. For sure.
Reimagine is such a beautiful word for we want to still make it look good, but find a lower cost material.
Reimagine is a great word. It's a great word, right? It could be a song title. It could be anything.
That's going to be my hammer now in conversation.
I mean,
you need the jazz hands when you say it.
My last new development project, the one before my last one, was right after COVID, and we were stuck in the supply chain delivery issue. And so we were ready to close, and people were yelling and screaming. Their rentals were coming up, blah, blah. We couldn't close because several of our kitchen appliances were stuck and floating in the ocean somewhere. Right. So I had to have a hissy fit and yell and scream at the developer and say, hey, cancel the order and buy domestic. Who cares? Right. Put an amendment to the offering plan saying we're changing the appliances, which is okay, with the Attorney General's office. We got our supply in weeks, and we were able to close.
Brilliant.
But he was sitting there, standing on his laurels, saying, well, they're stuck in the ocean. Okay, you're going to go and pick it up? And how are you going to do that?
Wasn't there a development company that purchased a glass fabrication company during COVID? Because they just couldn't get the glass. So they were like, great, we're just going to buy a company and do it ourselves.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, we've got to take another quick break. We're coming back for our last block right after these messages. Don't go anywhere. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place. The More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
We talk about all of these increases in monthlies, increases in carrying cost, interest rates being what they were. Do you think all of it, whether it's new development, whether it's co-op, whether it's condo, do you think all of it fundamentally changes? And we touched on this, throughout our conversation today, but do you think any of it really fundamentally changes the way we look at value here in New York City real estate going forward? I mean, we all know value is important. We all know New York City real estate is priced higher than, anywhere else in the world. We all know that New York City real estate is a fascination around the world, okay? This show is a global show. The reason why it gets the numbers it gets is because people around the world are fascinated with what we do and talk about in New York City real estate. How is this affecting the overall value in the future? Because we have to think about value in and value out. As I said at the top of the show, and I'm probably going to repeat it in the close, it's about getting in and being comfortable, but it's about staying in and being comfortable.
I think value is very multifactorial. So there's not one thing. And I think a lot of times people and consumers, for sake of mental simplicity, want to find, okay, what's this one thing that's going on that's going to determine, my value? I own property in 5 different states, and it's not to tout anything other than it's very interesting to see how value moves over time between different markets and what the reasons are for that. And, in New York City, it's a great retainer of equity because there's many different industries that come in. You have job growth, right, that always kind of focuses and centers around here between, some of the highest corporate level jobs. You have, entertainment and arts and all of these different things. Supply and demand is a huge driver of value, and what's going to go on with that, from the political landscape to development, applications for new development. So there are many, 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 I'd say multifactorial aspects of value. But when you dig in the surface of New York City real estate, when you look at all those, the headline of the story is it makes us incredibly resilient, very good in terms of mitigation of risks. We might go through times where we shoot up a lot. We might go through times where it stays stable, but you're generally not going to lose, too much, which if you're in it for the long game is really good. And you should, if you're a consumer, understand all those factors to value.
Well said. I completely agree. Anna, so you and I are in the business probably around the same. I think you were a couple of years before me. And I was on what I call a TED Talk this morning here at Brown Harris Stevens, talking to people out there about content and about a few other things. But I want to ask you, and I'm going to ask everybody the same question, say 24, 25 years ago when we started, how, in your opinion, taking all of this conversation into play as well, how has the industry changed in your opinion? Where, were we here and where are we now and everything in between? And how do we as agents, and you're very successful in your business, how do we keep up with that change and continue to move on? What does it take? First of all, how has it morphed in your opinion? And then what does it take to continue to stay up here?
I would argue that it's very similar to what it always has been. People have always been extremely conscious about value. We're on an island, and like Ben said, in the long run, in New York City and Manhattan, prices are only going up. And that has, and for the entire time I've been in the business, that has always been the case. Yes, we've had small dips here and there, but in the long run, we've always increased in value. This is a safe investment. And let's not forget, this is also your home. So you're living for free, essentially, instead of throwing money away on rent.
But the perception out there around the world, okay, and I'll use around the world or global or around the U.S., I mean, it's like, New York, man, this is it. Why?
It is, because we're the best.
And we're New Yorkers. I couldn't agree with you more. Your opinion, so how has it morphed into where we are today based on how long you're in the business, where you started? I mean, all of these changes, we can talk about commission changes on the buy side, commission changes on the rental side, and on and on and on. All these agreements that we now have to deal with that we didn't have to deal with before. Life sort of was simple back in the day. It isn't anymore. And how do you learn to become a better negotiator? Is one of the things I was talking about on the talk this morning. You got to learn to be more than a coach these days with your clients and a better negotiator.
So a lot has changed. It was never easy for me. So I don't know, did I miss that? I started in 2007. But it is way more complicated now, way more complicated. And as far as sharpening your, negotiation skills, really listening to podcasts like yours is very helpful for agents to sharpen their skills and being good listeners, understanding what is being said, what's not being said. And then I think the third thing is understanding, New York City is cyclical, right? And so I've studied sort of the cycle decade over decade. And what I've noticed is that the periods of softening are actually expanding. So purchasing at the right time is more important than ever. Having a good broker, and being able to sort of cut through the noise is more important so that if exiting with the right numbers is critical to you, then you have to buy at the right time.
Ben, your thoughts on that? Because again, it's changed. It is cyclical. Buyers are buyers, sellers are sellers. New York City is New York City. Where have you seen it from when you started to where you are today? Where has it come? Are we in a good place? Are we still trying to get to that good place again? What are your perceptions on that?
I think one of the things that's always stuck with me is New York City is not a city of New York. It's not a city of the United States. It is a city of the world. And when and so just think about that for a second, right? When you look at all the other cities around the world, how many of them are as diverse with so many other nations, places, things of that nature, with everything from universities that parents want to send their kids to the arts, to the congregation of, business and financial markets, to medicine and tech. So the ease in which people can develop those relationships and, get things done and have amazing experiences here, I think is the common thread and common bond of it. It was a world city. It continues to be a world city. And, and it is. And that's what keeps that, I think, demand so, valuable and high. What's changed is that, we have had to have even more grit as a city in the face of changing political environments and regulations and, things going on, in our country that, impact the city and things of that nature. And at every single turn, it really shows the strength of that world city because we're able to pull through it every single time. And it just makes us better and better, I think, as time goes on.
Yeah, I agree. And, one of the questions people ask me all the time is, my family lives in the suburbs, like an hour north of here in Westchester, and I know you're from the suburbs as well. Why is New York City kind of slow down? Why is New York City kind of like big bump in the road when everything residential-wise in the suburbs is flying off the shelf? Now, my first answer is, well, because you're hundreds of thousands of dollars cheaper than us, but for the most part. But the burbs are moving, and inventory is moving. I mean, where my family lives, if something goes on the market within a week, it's gone. And a lot of times there are bidding wars. I've had people here from Connecticut. I've had people here from Westchester talk to us about it. It's not the same in New York City. Why? Why?
Well, part of it is COVID. People are working from home. So it's easier to live in the suburbs. You couldn't do that when you had to come to the office.
But we're
5 days
6
a
years
week.
later. I hear you. You're right. But I'm like, okay, let's get on with it. Right?
I kind of have a funny play on, and I've no political stance here, but Bill Clinton on his 90s campaign would have something where it's the economy, stupid, and I would just say with that is it's the economics, not calling people stupid, but when you look at the supply and demand, supply is the biggest driver. Like everything can always be pinpointed back to supply and demand.
Always.
And in the suburbs, because of what happened during COVID and where rates are and people staying in place, the supply is still substantially lower compared to historical levels than New York supply at the historical levels. And you need to look no further than that. Now, there are aspects that drive that, but it is the economics. So
it's the economics, and we've talked about it on the show. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I think the guests that were here, we all kind of agreed that supply is going to be our biggest problem this year, and not interest rates or not even carrying costs. I mean, they're going to be, out there, but supply is our issue. We all remember the days when we can go out there and show a new buyer of ours 15 apartments in one day. Rent a car service and schlep around the city, whatever, and 10, 15 apartments in a day, and then 2 days later start again. I mean, I'm lucky if I can show 3 or 4
Well,
in
we
a
only
day.
have 5,383 listings in Manhattan right now.
Okay.
When we started in the business, it was closer to 15,000, so 3 times more.
Yeah. And it was interesting for us as agents because I got to tour all of these apartments. We used to go on tours also, learn the inventory. As I tell brand new agents all the time, learn the inventory. That's how you're going to be credible in your industry, with being able to understand what buildings are all about, neighborhoods are all about, et cetera. Let's talk briefly in the few minutes that we have left about, we talk about the sales market kind of like slowed down, carrying costs, whatever you want to, call it. Rental market is booming. And rental market, I think I saw something recently yesterday on social media where one of my broker friends posted, the New York City rental prices have gone up again historically and completely out of control. What is that about?
Yeah, we're seeing rents at 100 per square foot gross being sort of a norm for a lot of downtown rentals, which was never the case.
But it's increasing all over.
I have a crazy story. We put something on the market for $22,500, and it rented per month, and it rented for $37,000.
That is crazy.
Is that crazy?
That is
We had
crazy.
5 written applications.
How big was the home?
It was a 4-bedroom.
Oh, that's a nice
Yes,
size.
a nice 200 Amsterdam.
Oh,
Beautiful home.
Yeah.
Oh, 200
But
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that.
$37,000 a month.
Congratulations.
I mean, I'll go back to my
But
previous.
you can't rent that kind of place anywhere else but in New York, which is my point before about New York City. But go ahead.
Well, and that's a really interesting point, because I think what a lot of people miss about some parts of New York City real estate is I think we've talked about this before, that intrinsic artwork value to some pieces of property, whether it's a rental or a sale, that you can never truly capture when it's low, supply. But I'll go back to the economics again, right? Is, after the 421As left, we're going into a glut right now where the 485Xs have not replaced it. The city of Yes hasn't replaced it at the same level. So rental supply, way, 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 way low compared to historical levels. And then you bring in the FAIR Act and a lot of the different regulations, and none of them have helped the supply factor, and which it just keeps driving this higher and higher. So we keep missing that, when did rents come down the most? During COVID, when there was a flood of supply. Right. So what are we doing to increase the supply factor with all that? And until that changes, you're just going to keep seeing that happen, with rents in terms of the growth there.
Talk to us a little bit about, we got a few minutes left. Where do you think we're going to go the rest of 2026? We just started a new year. I can't believe we're already into almost the end of the first quarter. It just flips me out when I think we're in March already. What are your predictions for the balance of 26? Better than 25 and 24? About the same? And what may be some of the hangups, if not a good prediction?
On the buy side, there's no other way I can describe it besides frenzy. The sort of high net worth individuals I'm working with, it's these homes come on that are desirable and well priced, and they're moving very quickly, and there's limited inventory. So there's a bit of a frenzy. On the sale side, I would say if you're not priced exactly right, then you'll languish. And on the new development side, we have to recalibrate pricing a little bit to make ourselves appealing again.
Anna, your predictions?
We're in an equilibrium market, which is good for buyers and good for sellers. I think we're going to have a very similar year to last year.
Okay.
I have a counterculture
Mr.
view.
Ben?
If you can.
Bring it on.
Sugar high, sugar low, resilience with further strength. So I think when you start looking at, there's a lot of weakness I see outside of our city, just in capital markets and things like that concern me quite a bit. So the data from open house data, contracts, being signed, and the demand side, to Jill's point, is very high. And I think we're having a strong start to the year. Expect some major bumps and rocky road aspects. And if you're resilient, you run a good business, you're a good consumer, we're still going to come through, I think, the other side of that very, very, well and strong. But there's a lot of wobbliness out there that you got to be watching out for some things, I think. So.
Indeed. Okay. With that, we're going to come right back with my final thoughts right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back with my final thoughts. So for years, price per square foot was the headline number. It was clean, comparable, and easy to communicate. But this market is demanding a more sophisticated lens. Carrying costs are no longer background noise. They are central to valuation, liquidity, and risk. Buyers are underwriting monthly burn with the same intensity they once preserved for purchase price. In a payment-sensitive environment, affordability is defined by cash flow, not just acquisition costs. This doesn't mean price per square foot is irrelevant. It means it's incomplete. Smart buyers are analyzing total cost of ownership over time. Smart sellers are understanding that elevated monthlies shrink the buyer pool, and smart brokers are referring value through the lens of long-term sustainability and not just headline pricing. In this cycle, discipline wins. Buildings with strong financials, reasonable operating expenses, and transparent governance will always outperform. Properties with bloated costs will not. And that's it. We need to understand value. It isn't only about getting in, it's about staying in and holding. And that's our episode for today of Talking New York Real Estate. We should always remember it's not about grand promises or overnight change. It's about intention. Choosing clarity over noise, growth over comfort, and being deliberate with how we show up every day. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching and being a part of the conversation. If you think this episode brought value, share it, subscribe, and keep asking the questions that matter. Until next time, stay informed, stay intentional, and keep finding your space. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Substack, or TikTok at Vince Rocco. And George Allen Sr. said, success is what you do with your ability. It's how you use your talent. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I am grateful. Keep thinking the good thoughts, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.